way to save the season to throw. Fire down! Incomplete down at the goal line by San Diego. Tomlinson off the left side. Tomlinson sidestep. Hello, history books. I think they have to now. Here's Sproles. Sproles inside the 10, inside the 5, and the Chargers win the game.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to my first draft episode of the walkthrough. We're going to be here today talking about the 2025 Edge class. Lots of guys to talk about. I'm going to give you my top 5 rankings and a couple of sleepers. I think I graded 15 players for this draft class. Lots of edge guys to look at. Lots to talk about. What fits, what doesn't. What skill sets do we like? Which skill sets do we not like? Lots and lots of things to talk about. So thank you for joining me. Sorry we've been a little delinquent in our draft coverage this year. Lots of stuff going on. Sicknesses, family issues, all kinds of stuff going on for all three of us. So a lot of things preventing us from doing what we love doing and what we want to do, which is being here talking to you guys about the Chargers and the NFL draft. So thank you for joining us. Happy to be here on a Friday. Hopefully you're all excited to be here, and hopefully we have a good time and learn a lot about the Edge class this year. Wanted to kind of start with some news on the team. There have been a couple signings since the last time I was on, and those signings are tight end Tyler Conklin, and today the Chargers announced they signed who I can only assume would be QB3, and Trey Lance, formerly of the 49ers and the Cowboys. So Conklin obviously gives the Chargers another receiving tight end, takes some pressure off of Will Dissly in that regard. He's a guy who is effective in the seams, is a pretty solid route runner, does a decent job of creating some separation at the top of his route, and makes contested catches. So not a burner, not a guy who's going to make big plays, but a pretty steady contributor, I should say, in the intermediate passing game. So a good addition there in Conklin. And as for Lance, a guy who's going to come in, probably get a lot of run as QB3. Not sure how that's going to help them evaluate some of the wide receivers at the bottom of the depth chart, because Lance is a guy who has struggled quite a bit in his limited time in the NFL, but a guy with a lot of traits, a guy who was a first-round pick not all that long ago, and maybe they see something in him as a long-term QB2 behind Justin Herbert, and gives them a variance of skill sets, we'll say. He's an athletic guy. He can move around, extend plays, create with his legs, got a big arm. So we'll see what he looks like in the preseason. Hopefully he doesn't, deter the wide receivers at the back of the depth chart from making plays and being able to be evaluated. So all good things. So let's get into this draft class. As you all know, here at the Lightning Round podcast, we have our own, we'll call it quote unquote proprietary draft grading scale. Man, I can't talk today. Sorry, guys. Anyway, we look at a variety of things. For the Edge class, we look at things like their football IQ, basically their football awareness, how they adjust, how they develop over the course of their career, how they see the field, how they react and identify to blocking schemes, things like that. We grade their pass rush productivity. We grade their ability in the running game. We look at things like their bend or flexibility, their length, their ability to finish, first step, all of those things. Their versatility and flexibility, ability to play multiple positions along the defensive line. Those are all things that we look at for edge players. So this is an edge class that a lot of people are talking about. There are some really fun guys at the top of the class. And then after the first handful of guys, it kind of falls off a little bit. But let's talk a little bit about my edge class. So I'm going to give you guys my top 5. I'll give you a couple sleepers, and then beyond that, I might throw out a couple other names of guys that I like based on what I saw on tape. So let's go ahead and start. We're going to start with my number 5. And we are going to start with, and I know I'm going to butcher this guy's name, and it's kind of my thing on this show, so I apologize. But my number 5 is Donovan Ezeriaku. I'm sure I butchered that, and Donovan, if I did, I'm sorry, but I did the best I could. So Donovan is a guy who he's 6'2", 240. He looks a little bit small on tape, but he has surprisingly long arms. He's got 34-inch arm length or reach, which is well above average for an edge player. You know, a lot of edge players, they're in that 32 inches to 33-inch range, and usually most edges are small, or their reach is not as long as most tackles that they're facing. Well, Donovan, I'm just going to call him Donovan for this show. Not going to try to pronounce that last name again. He is a guy who his arms are basically as long as most tackles he's going to face. So he's not at a deficit there, which is a good place to start for an edge player. Some of the strengths, some of the things that I liked for Donovan on tape, really, really liked the length, like I mentioned. He also understands to win with his frame. Donovan plays with great leverage. He understands how to get underneath the tackle's hands. You can see him dip and bend under the initial punch of the tackles, which makes him tough to get hands on. And he softens, bends, and flattens the edge with his hands. Uses his hands really, really well. Donovan also has very sudden punch, and he stuns tackles with some very strong hands. He also has some fun counters. Donovan has a very effective spin move, which he uses both to the inside and the outside. You see him win with a swing move. He uses a dip and rip. And he also has a really fun Euro step that he uses to freeze tackles, which allows him to win both outside and inside. He's really effective getting to the B gap, kind of freezing tackles with that Euro step, jumping back inside and slipping through the B gap. Fun to watch. Also, because of his length, he's a really strong finisher when he gets home. Uses his length really well to reach out and get to the quarterback. He'll attack the ball with his offhand when finishing, so he forces fumbles. He's just a very strong, fun finisher. So those are the strengths that I saw with Donovan. I'm going to pronounce that name one more time, Ezeriaku. I think that's how you pronounce it, and that's as close as I'm going to get. In terms of weaknesses or things to work on, for Donovan, he's not an overly explosive athlete. He can be kind of slow off the line at times. That first step isn't super explosive. He's not a guy who's going to just race around tackles on a consistent basis. He's going to win with some bend and some length and technique, but he's not going to just outrace tackles to the edge. It's just not who he is. There's nothing sudden about him. The rush plan and the counters need developing. I mentioned he has some fun counters. He does a good job of using those spin moves, the swim move, and the dip and rip. When his initial rush stalls out, he has a hard time getting to the quarterback. He will win in some instances with effort when he gets blocked initially, but he's not somebody who is going to win with a variety of counters. He's not going to win with hand technique on a consistent basis. More often than not, if the tackle wins, especially longer tackles, he'll get engulfed if he doesn't win early. So that's something he has to work on. I think the play strength and the endurance need work. He's not super powerful. He does have a good bull rush at times, but it's not consistent. I think the functional strength needs some work. And I also think you can see him, because he has to work so hard to get to the quarterback at times, you can see him wear down during games. He just isn't strong enough to be a 3-down edge, is Donovan. He's a guy who struggles to set the edge. He can see the field through a straw at times, which means he's got kind of narrow vision. He'll zero in on the quarterback, and he'll lose track of where the ball is and lose contain. So overall, I liked Donovan. You love the length. You love the toolbox that he has in terms of the spin moves, the swim move, the dip and rip, and the Euro step. All good things to build off of. He is a developmental, right now, I would say he's a situational pass rusher coming out of the league. You might see him get some opportunities to be a 3-down guy. I just don't think he's going to hold up in the running game in the NFL right away. He's going to have to get stronger. He's going to have to work on his technique and his awareness. And you're going to have to see him develop some counters. So as a third rusher, maybe as a secondary rusher, he's a guy who could have some success. I have an 85 on Donovan, so a mid-second round pick. He's probably a guy who sneaks into the late first round with that grade. I haven't seen the entire draft class yet, so I'm not really sure where he's going to fall, but my guess is this is probably a draft class that's going to be really heavy on mid, like early to mid second round grade guys making their way into the first round. So that is Donovan Eziraku, my edge number 5. And the next person I'm going to talk about here is Tennessee edge James Pierce. Pierce is 6'5", 245. He's a guy, he kind of falls more into the traditional edge player where he's got 32.5-inch reach. So not super long, not terribly below average, but the length is kind of just in that range where it's good enough to get by, but it's not elite. Pierce is a guy who he's got a really good combination of explosiveness and some fun power. So he's able to convert speed into power. He gets off the ball really quickly. He's able to access the pocket really easily from the B gap and off the edge. Consistently steps up in the fourth quarter and makes big plays on third down late in games. You can see him winning consistently with a 2-arm bull rush, a long arm bull rush. He's got a really good push-pull move to take advantage of the length and the power that he does have, and also a nice shoulder punch to access the pocket. Pierce is a guy who shows a lot of awareness in terms of using how the offensive tackle is positioned against the tackle. You'll see him anticipate snap counts. He'll knock offensive linemen off balance. If he catches you on your heels, look out, because with that power, he's probably going to put you on the ground. Pierce also is a guy who excels as a penetrator and a disruptor versus the run. He understands blocking schemes and does a really good job of attacking their weaknesses. He is a guy, unlike Donovan, the first guy I talked about. Pierce is an edge who does a really, really good job of winning with suddenness. He's very explosive off the line, does a good, not great job of bending to get around the edge. I think he's also versatile. He can play a base end in a 4-3 scheme. He can stand up and play linebacker, outside linebacker in an odd front. He could probably play some 5 technique. He's just very explosive and very fun to watch in that regard. Some things that I think stood out to me in terms of maybe not necessarily weaknesses, but areas that he can work on. Pierce is very tight in the hips, and there's a general lack of bend that can make him difficult to flatten the edge and change directions. And I think his ability to finish can also be limited by a lack of bend. He's a guy who gets in the pocket. He collapses the pocket on a consistent basis. He gets around the quarterback on a consistent basis. But Pierce leaves a lot of plays on the field. He's a guy who can get reckless and out of control when he's about to get home. I think there are some issues there with play strength, especially in his lower body. And I think the lack of flexibility and the narrow hips that he has and the lack of lower body strength might make it difficult for him to fill out his frame a little bit. He's a guy who really struggles with contact balance. He might win with his first couple steps, but if a tackle catches up and reaches out and pokes him as he's trying to bend the edge, he usually winds up on the ground. Just leaves way too many sacks on the field for my liking. There's a lot to work with there. There's a lot to be excited about. The physical traits, I think, the length, the explosiveness, the athleticism, all those things are really promising, and they make him very enticing. And he's a guy who I'm sure is going to wind up being taken, kind of mid to late first round, most likely. But I think those issues with the bend, with the lack of flexibility, the change of direction, the way that he's kind of he has a linear attack plan in terms of how he wants to get to the quarterback, and the plays that he leaves on the field, I think those are things that are probably going to carry over to the NFL. So while I like him, and while I think he's probably going to be a productive NFL player, I have an 85 on him as well. He's a guy who I think is really going to have to work on his technique as a run defender. Right now, he's really better suited to penetrating and disrupting. He's not really a consistent edge setter. He can get kind of wedged out of his gap, and he can kind of lose focus and get a little undisciplined and just forfeit the edge at times. So those are areas that he needs to work on. But again, really good athlete, really fun player, a guy who I think is going to be productive at the NFL level, and is probably going to make some defensive coordinators, whichever defensive coordinator winds up with him, very happy. So I see here the random guy saying, I know the combine isn't everything, but Pierce tested pretty awfully in the explosive drills. I think his explosiveness shows up on tape. Those first two to three steps are really good, and he's a long strider. So if he gets by you with the first step or two, it's going to be hard to catch up. I think what you're seeing in some of those explosive drills is the lack of bend and flexibility, and I think that's what's going to catch up to him more than anything. But we shall see. He's a guy who I'm sure teams are going to be eager to vet and get their hands on early in the draft. There are some character issues with him. I know there's been talk that that they kind of babied him at Tennessee. They let him get away with kind of whatever he wanted. And they didn't really keep him on a very short leash. So he's a guy who more than likely might fall a little bit. I usually try to stick with just evaluating the film, to be honest with you. I don't know the guy. I haven't interviewed him. I don't have a lot of details on what he went through. I just know there are some character concerns for him. So I'm sure that will factor in. But from an athletic standpoint and a productivity standpoint, it's hard to deny that James Pierce is a pretty talented guy who's probably going to have some level of success at the NFL as long as he can stay out of trouble. Next, and this is one of my favorite watches in this draft class, and this is Marshall edge Mike Green, another guy with off-field issues, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But Green, to me, is one of the more polished pass rushers in this class. Notice I didn't say polished edge defenders. He isn't the best run defender. He can play kind of small at times, and he has a lack of length that catches up to him. So there are definitely some concerns about him as a 3-down player right now, and we'll get to those in a minute. But in terms of the things that I liked, so Green is a 6'4", 250-pound, really stand-up rush linebacker. Can he play some wide 9 and some base 4-3 defense? Probably. He's not a guy you're going to see play 5 technique or 3 technique. But when he is on the edge and he's allowed to pin his ears back and go after the quarterback, he is so much fun to watch. Mike Green is extremely explosive. He plays with explosiveness. Didn't pay too close of attention to his combine testing numbers. Just what I saw on tape. His first 2 steps might be the best in the class. Consistently wins with that first step, does Mike Green. He's able to win with speed, bend, power, and technique. He's a guy who can convert that blazing speed that he has around the edge into a bull rush. You can see him consistently winning with a bull rush, swim move, a club move, a spin, both inside and outside, and a dip and rip. He's a guy who he doesn't just bend the edge or flatten the edge. It seems like he kind of melts into and around the edge. He's around that. He turns that corner in 1 step. he flips his hips, and he's on top of the quarterback. Green is just so good at getting around that edge and closing like a bat out of hell. It's just amazing to watch. Just so much fun. The thing that I like about him that I think makes him more polished as a pass rusher than most of the guys in this class is the way that he strings counters together without throttling down. You'll see him use 2, 3, 4 moves at a time to get to the quarterback. It's not just a bull rush and stall out and then fight with your hands. He'll hit you with a bull rush. He'll set you up with a spin move. You'll see a Euro step. There's just so many ways for him to win, and he transitions into and out of his counters so well that it's really hard for tackles to keep up. And I mentioned the closing speed. It's phenomenal. And he's an extremely violent and physical finisher who's another guy who uses that offhand to go after the football when he gets home. In terms of his ability to get to the quarterback, he has so many ways to beat you. He is so much fun. Just a pleasure to watch and evaluate. In terms of weaknesses, he can be reckless. There's no doubt about it. There are times where he'll get out over his skis and be really easily knocked off balance by tackles with long arms. He's really susceptible. He has very narrow field vision. He basically only sees the quarterback. And because of that, he's really, he'll over pursue the mesh point, trying to get the sack. He's very susceptible to misdirection and ball fakes. Green lacks ideal length, and you can see that show up sometimes on tape. If he doesn't win early, and he doesn't win with his punch, Green is a guy who he can get engulfed at times. He will give up contain too quickly to jump inside and try to make a play, which is another example of him really falling for those misdirection and ball fakes at times. And he's going to have to learn to pace himself a little bit better. I think the functional strength will have to improve. I would also say that timing is going to be really important for him. He's already pretty technically sound in terms of the counters that he has. I think his hand technique can certainly improve. And I think his hand placement and the timing of his punch can improve. He's going to have to win really consistently with his hands at the next level in order to win and get to the quarterback. If he doesn't figure that out and he's consistently getting beat by longer tackles to the punch, then he's going to have a hard time winning. So even though he's explosive and he has so many ways to beat you around the edge and inside, I think the technique is going to be really important for him. He's going to have to learn to beat those tackles, and he's going to have to learn to make tackles miss more often than not. And if he does that, he's going to be just fine. Green is my personal edge 3 in this class. I have an 86 on Mike Green. So an early to mid second round pick, probably going to wind up going late in the first round is my guess. And Green is another guy who had some off-field issues. He started out at Virginia. He was a top recruit, wound up going to Virginia, left Virginia after, I believe, his freshman or sophomore year. And there were some, I think, sexual assault allegations that he left Virginia to get away from. So another guy who has to be vetted. You've got to be really comfortable that he's matured and that he's grown past some of those character issues. Make sure you really understand what happened. Sexual assault is one of those things. It's kind of like, it's like domestic abuse. It's one of those things that's really hard to come back from. So you got to be sure you're really, really comfortable with who he is as a person now, and that you understand what happened during that time at Virginia. So that is Mike Green, my edge 3. And he has an overall grade of 86. Now, my edge 2 is somebody who is listed on most draft boards as an off-ball linebacker. But in my opinion, he is misused as an off-ball linebacker. He's not comfortable there. He's not as decisive. I don't like him in a situation where he has to read and react. Can he play some off-ball linebacker? Is he effective maybe as a Will or even as a Sam in certain fronts? Sure, absolutely. He's also really effective as a spy. But to me, he's best suited playing edge, and that is Georgia linebacker, defensive lineman, stand-up linebacker, Jalen Walker. Walker, to me, reminds me a lot of Micah Parsons when he came out of Penn State. Parsons played a lot of inside linebacker. He played a lot of outside linebacker. There was some debate as to where he was going to fit and be most productive. In my personal opinion, Jalen Walker is going to be super productive as an edge player. There's a lot to like from him. First of all, the athleticism is phenomenal. Walker has elite get off, elite closing speed, and just really elite and fun finishing ability. I do like the way Walker sets a firm edge in the run game. He makes play after play when his team needs it. Third quarter, fourth quarter, it seems like once you get past halftime, he turns it up and he's making play after play, both in the running game and as an edge rusher. Just a lot of fun to watch him step up and make plays in that regard. Also, I love the way he's able to win with speed and power. He can certainly beat you around the edge. He bends exceptionally well. And he can also turn that speed into power and beat you with a bull rush. Walker has demonstrated consistent growth in 3 years at Virginia. He keeps tackles off guard by varying points of entry into the pocket. And his change of direction is effortless. He's another guy who just kind of melts around the edge to get to the quarterback. A lot of fun to watch. In terms of weaknesses, Walker, because he played both inside linebacker and edge, he's a guy who hasn't really developed his tool set as a pass rusher. He can get a little bit out of control at times. He'll dive at tacklers. He'll lose his balance both as a rusher and as a finisher in the running game. I think the big thing for him is the instincts need developing. He's going to need to be taught counters, and he's going to need to develop a rush plan. Right now, he's pretty reliant on power and athleticism. He's going to have to learn some techniques and some counters. Walker also can be a little bit slow to locate the ball at times. He'll stick to offensive linemen when playing downhill as an inside linebacker, and he can have trouble disengaging because of the fact that his arms are a little bit shorter at 32 inches. And I would say Walker does not look very comfortable in coverage, but he's a guy who I think can step in right away. I think he can be a potential 3-down player pretty much right away. He's sound in the running game, and he's going to get after the quarterback. And you put him on a team, say with like a Khalil Mack or an established edge rusher who can teach him how to get home, I think he's going to be really special. Walker is my edge 2, and I have a grade of an 88 on him. So early second, late first round pick. And finally, this should come as no surprise. My edge 1 is Abdul Carter, 6'3", 250 pounds out of Penn State, 32-inch arm length. Carter is about as close to a finished product as you're going to get, and he is special. He's twitchy, he's long, he's extremely explosive, very, very loose hips and ankles, give him elite lateral quickness and allow him to bend the edge with ease. His first step might be the best in this class. Carter wins with speed, power, and counters. He has an inside spin move and an outside spin move, a dip and rip, and a club. And you see him kind of string counters together. He's just fluid and natural as a pass rusher is the best thing I can say. Just so effortless in the way that he bends and flattens the edge, and his closing speed is about as good as it gets in this class as well. The knocks on on Carter, I think sometimes he can play a little bit out of control, and there are times where he'll get knocked off balance. He'll lunge and dive for tackles. So that those are a couple things to look out for. I think he'll get overzealous and a little bit undisciplined in the running game. He'll abandon the edge to leap inside and try to make a play. I think Carter would benefit from strengthening his lower half. I think that would really help him with some contact balance issues as he's turning the edge. And there are some times when he leaves plays on the field due to lunging into tackles, like I mentioned. Carter, for me, is a guy, and I think you can say this about Walker, he's versatile. He's a guy who can play multiple positions. He's more than likely going to be a stand-up outside linebacker. I think Carter is a guy who can also play some 4-3 base end. He'd certainly have a lot of success in a wide 9 alignment. I don't really necessarily want him playing 5 technique, but he's another guy who can play some off ball. He can play some Will, some Sam, some Mike in certain situations. He's highly effective when it comes to being a spy, and he is able to literally make plays sideline to sideline. Just another guy who's a lot of fun to watch. So my top 5 edge players in this class are Boston College edge Donovan Eziriaku, Tennessee edge James Pierce Jr., Marshall edge Mike Green, Jalen Walker from Georgia with an 88 is my number 2, and Abdul Carter with a 95 is my number 1. My guess is he'll probably wind up being my number 1 overall prospect in this class. I mentioned earlier that I reviewed a lot of guys. I think I watched 15 total guys, something like that. I have 2 sleepers for you. There are a couple other guys that I want to talk about because they're getting some hype, and I like first round hype that I don't get. One guy in particular who I didn't really care for, who I think is kind of mislabeled as an edge, and he was getting some first round buzz and some mocks that I saw, and that's Texas A&M edge Shamar Stewart. This is a guy who I just don't get it as an edge. I know he's a really good athlete, and I know there are some physical traits there that people think they can develop, but this is a guy who had 4.5 sacks in 3 years at Texas A&M. He is not a pass rusher, in my opinion, at least not right now. So I'm just going to chat about him real quick, just to give my thoughts on him. Stewart is 6'5", 270, really long arms at 34.5 inches. So, I mean, he literally looks like he was built to play edge in terms of the frame and the length are ridiculous. Very thick, muscular frame combined with really good burst and freakish length. I think he's got the longest arms of any edge in this class, if I'm not mistaken. The first step is great. He played some outside linebacker. He played some base end, some 5 technique and 3 technique in college. Shows the ability to convert speed to power. Has a nice long arm and 2-arm bull rush that he uses to collapse the pocket. His strength really is beating guys, is winning inside. He's a nightmare for guards to handle. Sets a pretty physical edge and possesses the quickness to leap from gap to gap. I think what bothered me about him is he is so underdeveloped, is Shamar Stewart, in terms of his hands and his counters. Stewart is consistently late with his hands. He plays really high, leans out over his feet, which can cause him to get knocked off balance. There's some hip and ankle tightness there, and that can make it easy for tackles to knock him off balance at the top of his rush. He doesn't have a plan for when he doesn't win with the first step. Hands are alarmingly underdeveloped, and he lacks counters. There is no plan B. There's barely a plan A as a pass rusher. Stewart hasn't learned how to shed blockers and finish sack attempts, and he can be really slow to locate and get to the football. I have a 76 on Stewart, which is an early to mid 3rd round pick. I'm sure he's going to go earlier than that based on the traits, but this is a guy who just did not have the production at the college level. Personally, if I were looking to draft him, if he's somebody that I was interested in, it would be as a 5 technique, with some potential upside as a 3 technique in NASCAR packages. I think that's going to be his sweet spot in the NFL. I just don't like him standing up. I think he's better with 1 hand in the ground, potentially 2 hands in the ground. Don't love him standing up. Don't love him trying to win around the edge. I'd be much more comfortable with him attacking the A and B gaps. Maybe even playing some 4-I, and lining up against the guards more often. But that's my take on Shamar Stewart. Just somebody I wanted to mention simply because he seems to be highly regarded in this draft class, and I don't get it. I don't think he's somebody I'd want to use an early pick on. All right, let's talk sleepers. I've got a couple sleepers for you. One of whom has already been mentioned in the chat from what I saw, and somebody who I haven't seen anybody mention. So, and this pick seems like a no-brainer to me. I know last year we didn't really know what to expect from Ortiz and Harbaugh, and I think the expectation was Harbaugh was just going to load up on Michigan players, and that, of course, didn't happen. But I do think there is a Michigan player who makes sense for this defense because of the way they like to attack the quarterback and they like to bring blitzes from multiple angles. And that is Michigan edge Josiah Stewart. Now, Stewart, he's going to probably fall down the board a little bit because he's a little bit on the small side. I think he plays, if I'm not mistaken, at 6'1", 230, 235, somewhere in that range. Certainly not too small to play edge, but I think the issue for him as an every down edge is the lack of length. At 6'1", his arm length is under 32 inches at 31 7/8. So, excuse me, Stewart is 6'1", 250. So not as small as I thought, but the reach is still an issue. But what I like about Stewart is he just flat out knows how to get to the quarterback. Stewart is a guy who has just a ridiculous combination of speed and bend. There were several times where it just seemed like his hips rotated 360 degrees and he was around the edge in one step. It's crazy. He can beat you outside. He's also really good at getting basically unfettered access to the B gap. He has that Euro step. He has a little hesitation move. He can flat out race you around the outside. He'll dip under tackles' hands. You can see him winning with his first step, and he'll almost always beat extra blockers to their spot. Very high-level finisher, knows how to attack the ball with his offhand when he gets home. He is just he's kind of juiced up. Like he's that, to me, the Chargers have been lacking juice on the edge for the last couple of years. You know, they've relied on Bosa, they've relied on Mack, both of whom were kind of technical power rushers. They brought in Thule, who was a guy who kind of needed help. He needed to be schemed to the quarterback. Stewart just knows how to get home. He's such a good athlete. He's so explosive. And something else that I really like about Stewart is he looks really comfortable, and he looks like he has the potential to be productive in coverage. You could maybe see him playing a little bit of weak side linebacker, some stand-up outside linebacker, maybe some dime linebacker at times, moving him around, making him, I don't want to say chess piece because that's way overused, but putting him in a position to just attack. And if you haven't seen Stewart play, if you're not that familiar with him, go watch Michigan USC this year. He decimated the USC offensive line. Right tackle, left tackle, he beat guards. It didn't matter. He anticipates the snap. He's so quick off the ball. If he's even with you off the line of scrimmage after that first step, forget it. You're done. He's going to beat you around the edge, and he's probably going to get to the quarterback. The length is going to be an issue. He's going to have to be really, really clean and precise and on time with his hands. He doesn't have a whole lot of counters. Right now, he is almost entirely based off of speed, athleticism, and bend in terms of how he gets to the quarterback. So he's going to have to be taught. Who better to teach him than Khalil Mack? Bigger and longer tackles can swallow him up. So again, that punch timing is going to be super important. He does have heavy hands. You can see him shock tackles at times with his hands, but he's not going to be able to get away with being slow with his hands at the NFL level. And that's why some of those cross chops and other counters are going to be so important for him at the next level. And in terms of a run defender, he can be really linear and overrun ball carriers. And he has a tendency to drop his head going into contact and lose sight of ball carriers. But if you're looking for a day 2, possibly an early day 3, situational pass rusher who can just come on the field on 2nd and long and 3rd and long and give you juice off the edge, which is something I think this team desperately needs, especially if they address interior defensive line in the first round, like I think they will. Stewart is a perfect fit. and Harbaugh and Minter will know exactly how to deploy him, and it's going to be beautiful. They're going to be so juiced up, and they're going to have so much success getting to the quarterback. It's going to be a blast. So Stewart is my first sleeper. I just think those ties to Michigan and the way that he goes about getting to the quarterback and the explosiveness that he plays with are so much fun, and they're exactly what this defense needs. Just imagine him running stunts and twists with Mac or Thule. Going to be so much fun. So that's somebody I would look for, maybe late day 2, early day 3. My other sleeper is Ashton Gallote. He is, you see here, I'm just trying to find him. Ashton Gallote is a guy who has really a lot to be excited about in day 3. Again, I'm talking more situational pass rushers here as opposed to every down edge players, guys who can come in and play a role and get to the quarterback. Gallote is 6'3", 265, probably best suited to play 4-3 outside linebacker. I think he'd have some success in a wide 9 alignment. 4-3 base end. I think he'd have some success in a wide 9 alignment. I also think he'd be effective as a stand-up outside linebacker. Gallote has really impressive hip and ankle flexibility that allow for really tight cornering around the edge. He wins with a really strong bull rush. He's got a great outside stab, an inside spin move. His hands are super active. He has the bend to dip under the tackle's hands, flattens the edge in one step. Gallote plays low and behind his pads and maintains good leverage, and he has very strong hands to provide a heavy punch. He is basically tailor-made to be a situational edge rusher. Now, he's not as explosive as a guy like Josiah Stewart, but he is able to win in a variety of ways. He's more of he's going to win with technique and effort more so than explosiveness. I do think you can see the lack of reach showing up on tape. He has a hard time winning with his initial punch, and he has a hard time shedding blockers once they get into his pads. The burst is not elite. He is not super explosive. He's going to kind of build up speed as he gets around the edge. I think the rush plan and counters need some development. He's definitely going to need to get stronger. That functional strength and the play strength are going to have to improve. The legs are going to have to get a lot stronger. And I think the closing burst, it's okay. It's not great. It's certainly not elite. So those are my sleepers. I gave you my top 5. I gave you my sleepers. Does anybody have any edge players that they're excited about, that they'd like to ask about? I didn't watch everybody. Obviously, there's a lot of guys in this class, so I couldn't watch everybody. But if you have questions about anybody in particular, and I watched them, I'm more than happy to answer any questions or give you some feedback. So let's take a few minutes. Right now we are at, how long have we been on? We've been on for a while. Anyway, 44 minutes. So let's go ahead and take the next 10 or 15 minutes to answer questions. If you got a name, throw it out, and I will tell you if I watch them. So the first name that I see here is, do you think Mikael Williams can fall to 22? So Williams is a guy that I did watch. There's a lot to like about him, but I do think, as opposed to the guys in my top 5, I think Williams is a guy who is he's a bit of a boomer bust kind of a guy. He's another guy. So Mikael Williams, 6'5", 265, another guy with ridiculous reach, almost 35 inches arm length, which is phenomenal. Williams is a guy who he wins with a combination of length and power. He's extremely physical. very disciplined as a run defender. He right now, in my opinion, he's probably best suited to play a 5 technique. You might see him play a 4-3 base end. I think he can also stand up and play outside linebacker, although I don't think that's what his strength is necessarily right now. Williams is very quick to locate and get to the football versus the run. He possesses a very powerful bull rush, does a great job of converting speed to power, and his initial punch is really heavy. I think what you see with him, though, when NFL evaluators look at him, they're going to see the physical traits. He's enormous. He's very long. He's very athletic. He has all the things that you look at and you say, we can develop that guy. Every NFL coach is going to look at him and say, we can make that guy successful. And maybe they can. But right now, he is not what I would call a refined pass rusher. His rush plan, if you can call it that, is very predictable, very linear. He's just looking to push people back into the quarterback. One of the things that stood out to me with Williams is he is almost always the last defensive lineman off the ball. The instincts are not really there. The snap count anticipation is not there. He's just slow getting off the ball, which is going to be a problem at the next level. There is no developed rush plan. He lacks counters. If he doesn't win early, the hands stall. There's really very little hand activity after the initial surge off the line, if you want to call it that. And I think he's a guy who, even though he has a lot of traits that are exciting and you think you can develop, I think Williams is going to be kind of similar to Thule when he came out, in that he's going to need help getting to the quarterback early on. He's not a guy who's just going to win off the line of scrimmage on a consistent basis. Even though he has incredible length and he's a phenomenal athlete, he just isn't polished. The development, the growth isn't there, in my opinion. So he's going to take some time. Can he make it to 22? Yeah, I think he probably will. People are going to be excited about him, but I just don't think it's there consistently on tape for him. So we'll see. Unfortunately, I did not watch Landon Jackson, and I did not watch JT. So those are two guys I can't speak on. I'm not going to tell you I watched guys that I didn't watch. Anybody else? Anybody near the top or middle of that first group of edge players that you guys want to hear about? Give you guys a couple minutes. Let's see here. There are a couple other guys that I like. They didn't make my top 5, and they're getting too much run to be sleepers. And those guys, for me, guys who I think are going to be very productive as pass rushers, but maybe just didn't quite make that first cut of edge defenders. One of them is Texas A&M edge defensive lineman Nick Scorton. Scorton's a guy that I really enjoyed. He is versatile, which makes him very fun to watch. 6'3", 257, 33-inch reach, so the reach is adequate for an edge. Not elite, but adequate. Scorton is just a guy who he just plays with a level of urgency that I love. The motor is absolutely relentless. It never stops. It never runs cold. Extremely physical and tenacious run defender. Outstanding in pursuit and finishes violently. And in terms of a rusher, he is creative, he's fluid, and he's technically sound. He might have the deepest toolbox in terms of edge rush moves of anybody in this class. He uses a club, a swat, a stab, a bull rush, an up and under, an inside spin, and a Euro step. He flattens the edge extremely well. The hands are very heavy. They're advanced. They're extremely active. and he understands how to change his rush tempo. He alters the pacing of his strides, the length of his strides, and he uses that to disrupt passing lanes. And he does a great job of getting his hands into passing lanes when he doesn't get home. In terms of weaknesses, Squirtin isn't what I would say crazy explosive. You can sometimes see the lack of length showing up on tape when he's defending the run. There are times when he can be knocked off balance, but who can't? He'll get sucked inside and lose contain. And I think there's room for improvement as a finisher. I have an 84 on Squirtin, so kind of a mid-second round pick. He might be one of those guys that, you see go in the like 25 to 40 range, somewhere in there. So somebody that I really enjoyed watching. And another edge that I enjoyed watching who didn't make my top 5 is Old Miss edge Princely, and I'm going to butcher this name, Uman Milan. Hopefully I got that right. Princely is 6'4", 250-ish pounds. His reach is just under 34 inches, so adequate to very good. For Princely, I think he has the length of a tackle, which is a huge advantage for an edge. He has an outstanding combination of burst, bend, and very long strides. So he's quick off the line, and his strides are so long that if he beats you with that first step, he's probably gone. In fact, I even said, if he's even, he's leaving. If he's even with you or past you on the first step, good luck catching him. Another guy who bends so well and just seems to melt his way around the edge, which is really cool to watch. And when he can smell a sack or when he can smell a play in the running game, he ratchets up his closing speed. And my God, does he close fast. So much fun to watch. Also does a great job of using his length to finish. There are times where he gets run around the pocket and you'll just see him reach back with one arm and trip up the quarterback or poke the ball loose. So very creative and just very aware of how to use his frame and his physical tools to finish plays, which is not something you can say about a lot of these guys. And Princely also finishes with a violent forward lead and plays through the ball carrier. He looks to punish ball carriers and quarterbacks when he hits them. In terms of things to work on, while he's not necessarily undersized, I think Princely can play small at times. He doesn't possess great play or functional strength. He lacks the force and the strength, I think, to hold up as an edge setter early in his career. He's going to have to get a lot stronger. He's another guy who at times he really only sees the quarterback. He can be easily fooled by play fakes, by read options, zone reads, misdirection, and any kind of window dressing. The hand usage is underdeveloped. He right now wins with athleticism, explosiveness, and bend. That's how he wins. There isn't a lot of counters. So if he doesn't win early, he's probably not going to win because he doesn't have the power to play through tackles in a lot of cases. Like I said, there's really only one rush plan with no counters. And I think in terms of coverage and edge setting, there just isn't a lot to offer in year one. So he's going to be a situational rusher. He's going to have to get a lot stronger and show that he can hold up on the edge to be an every down guy. But definitely fun to watch and some upside. And I see the random guy making a point here about Squirtin, and this is an excellent point. It's something that Garrett and Craig and I talked about. It says, I feel like A&M ruins edge rushers. Squirtin goes from having double-digit sacks and more at Purdue to primarily being a run stopper. So I usually cringe when I see a Texas A&M edge defender listed as a potential first-round pick. And it's because these guys are always super talented, but they just don't get developed at Texas A&M the way you want them to. It seemed like in some ways Squirtin took a step back at A&M this year, but it is because they asked their edge guys to focus on stopping the run. So when he was allowed to pin his ears back and go after the quarterback, he was pretty successful. It's just the way that scheme works. They just don't develop their edges very well. They don't really put them in a position to succeed on a consistent basis. So yeah, whenever I see a Texas A&M edge defender listed in, as a potential first round pick, I usually cringe or have a little bit of a shudder because you can almost always bet they're going to be underdeveloped. So that's it. I gave you my top 5. I gave you my sleepers. I gave you a few other guys that I enjoyed watching. Though that is the 2025 edge class. If we're talking about guys who I think fit the Chargers, there are a couple. I do think Jalen Walker fits the Chargers if he's around at 22, mainly because he's so versatile. He can play some off-ball linebacker, even though I wouldn't recommend it on a regular basis. He's going to be highly productive as a run defender early in his career. And I think he already has a pretty good idea of how to get to the quarterback. He's going to need, like I mentioned, there are some things he's going to need some help with. He's going to need to develop some counters and come up with, more of a variety in his rush plan. But he's a guy who just makes plays. And I think if you're going to throw him out there as a situational edge rusher, maybe mix him in at, to give Khalil Mack a break as a, on rundowns on occasion. I think Walker could really step in and have a lot of success with the Chargers. Other guys who I think would be really successful with the Chargers, obviously I mentioned Josiah Stewart. I think he fits what they want to do. He knows the system. He's highly productive in the system. He would be a lot of fun as a day 2 or early day 3 pick. If the Chargers are comfortable with the off-field issues, I have a hard time saying Mike Green doesn't fit. I think you've got technicians in Mack and Thule. And I think you add an athlete and some juice on the edge on second and third down to start out and then build him up as an edge setter. Green could do some serious damage. And Skirton's another guy that I like. If you're looking for, a first or second round pick, Skirton's a guy who I like, who could play some interior, stand up and play some edge and have some success in that role. So those are some guys I think could really fit well for the Chargers. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I hope you all enjoyed the show. I know I enjoyed being here as always. So I'm going to give you back the rest of your Friday night. Thanks for checking in. I appreciate it. And I will see you guys next time. Have a good one.